The House will be in order. Members will be at their seats. The clerk has opened the roll. You may record your presence. Please rise and give your attention to the House chaplain. Remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Representative Blake Carpenter.
Let us pray. Gracious and loving God, we thank you for this day that you have given us. Please help our leaders to believe in and live into your gracious plan for this day. Remind them to look not unto their own interests, but to the good for this state and its people. Reveal to all of us that which is true, honorable, just, and pure. And may everything we say and do be guided by this. This is the day that you have made, and we lay before you all our plans and purposes. May our lives and decisions reflect the joy and hope we find not in ourselves, but in you. I pray this in your name. Amen.
Yeah, no, we text them to finish, but I don't know if we can. I might just read bills and then keep it rolling for a second. Susan? Keep it rolling for the letter and the bills in.
I'm sorry, what? So let's leave the roll open. Okay. Jane. So we're gonna do this a little different. We're gonna go ahead and do introduction of bills, but leave the roll open because appropriations is stuck.
So what do I do?
So just leave that open, and she's gonna do introduction of bills.
Okay, you want to give these back to me? I guess it's
Okay. Okay.
Body will give you a few more minutes to get logged in and record your presence. So we're going to move on to introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. The clerk will read.
House Bill number 2303 by Representative Toplick Arnett concerning income taxation relating to credits, adjusting the credit income amounts for the income tax credit for purchases of food in the state. House Bill number 2304 by Representative Toplick Arnett concerning income taxation relating to credits, increasing credit for expenditures to make a principal dwelling accessible to persons with a disability. House Bill number 2305 by Representatives Curtis, Henderson, and others. An act concerning minimum wage laws, permitting cities, counties, and local governments to set the minimum wage above federal or state levels by ordinance, resolution, or law. House Bill number 2306 by Representative Curtis, Burrows, and others, an act concerning employment relating to local government control over wages, compensation, or benefits for construction projects. House Bill number 2307 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning workers' compensation relating to the definition of personal injury, including certain mental injuries arising from physical injury, emotional shock, or a series of work-related events. House Bill number 2308 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning coroners relating to child death investigations, providing a process to identify a child's death as suspicious prior to performing an autopsy. House Bill number 2309 by Representative Hsu, an act concerning agriculture creating the Agriculture Equipment Right to Repair Act, requiring manufacturers of electronics-enabled equipment used in agriculture, animal husbandry, and ranching to make available to farmers, ranchers, and independent repair providers on fair and reasonable terms the documentation, parts, and tools used to diagnose, maintain, and repair such equipment. House Bill number 2310 by Representative Hsu, an act concerning agriculture relating to soil and watershed health, creating the Kansas Healthy Soils Fund and the Kansas Healthy Soils Initiative for the purpose of promoting healthy soils practices. House Bill number 2311 by Representative Clayton, an act concerning workers' compensation relating to permanent total disability, extending benefits for the lifetime of the injured worker. House Bill number 2312 by Representative Clayton, an act concerning workers' compensation, authorized injured workers to designate a health care provider for care thereunder. House Bill number 2313 by the Committee on Veterans and Military, an act concerning property taxation relating to motor vehicles, allowing Kansas National Guard and Reservist members who are in good standing to receive a property tax exemption for up to 2 motor vehicles. House Bill number 2314 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning sales taxation relating to payment of tax by retailers, time of payment for retailers, collecting a certain amount of sales tax and discontinuing the prepayment of such tax. House Bill number 2315 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning taxation related to income, premiums, and privilege tax, providing a credit for contributions to technical colleges. House Bill number 2316 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning financial institutions relating to payments made with a credit and debit card, eliminating or prohibition of surcharge for use of such cards. House Bill number 2317 by the Committee on Taxation, an act concerning taxation relating to tax credits, providing a credit for expenditures for placing into service qualified alternative fueling stations. House Bill number 2318 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to sentencing, modifying the definition of persistent sex offender. House Bill number 2319 by Representative Esau, an act concerning elections relating to the deadline for returning advance voting ballots. House Bill number 2320 by the Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development, an act concerning financial institutions enacting the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy or CPACE Act. House Bill number 2321 by Representatives Finney and Ellis, an act concerning electric utilities relating to the State Corporation Commission, construction of urban electric transmission line in cities requiring notice prior to construction. House Bill number 2322 by Representative Probst, an act concerning real estate transactions, regulating contract for deed transactions, making certain deceptive actions violations of the Consumer Protection Act. House Bill number 2323 by Representatives Woodard, Byers, and others, an act concerning marriage, relating to the recognition of marriages, eliminating requirements that parties are opposite sex. House Bill number 2324 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to certain health benefit plans, certain prescription drug benefits, establishing a $100 maximum out-of-pocket cost share per month per covered person for prescription insulin. House Bill number 2325 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to health insurers, healthcare providers, billing practices, prohibiting balance bills and surprise medical bills. House Bill number 2326 by Representative Lee Hahn, an act concerning elections regarding precinct committeemen and committeewomen, requiring supporting of certain information to the county clerk. House Bill number 2327 by Representative Lee Hahn, an act concerning counties relating to county homes for the aged and county hospitals, restricting county board of commissioners, trustees, or employees from infringing upon residents' rights to receive and refuse visitors in county home for the aged and county hospital. House Bill number 2328 by Representatives Tarwater, Anderson, and others, an act concerning income taxation, providing certain tax credits for graduates of aerospace and aviation-related educational programs and employers of program graduates. House Bill number 2329 by the Committee on Energy and Utilities and Telecommunications, an act concerning pipeline safety relating to the State Corporation Commission, pipeline safety program entities who are subject to the program. House Bill Number 2330 by the Committee on Energy and Utilities, Telecommunications, an act concerning energy relating to electric public utilities, authorizing certain sales of electricity pursuant to power purchase agreements. House Bill Number 2331 by Representatives Corbett, Barker, and others, an act concerning wildlife relating to certain duties of the Secretary of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, providing for the transferability of deer permits to non-residents. House Bill Number 2332 by Representative Topliker, an act concerning elections relating to advance voting ballots, requiring identification of the sender on third-party solicitations to registered voters to file an application for an advance voting ballot.
Have all members had the opportunity to record their presence? The clerk will close the roll and record the attendance.
Next item.
Change of reference. House Bill 2203 is withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations, referred to Committee of Ag Budget. Change of reference. House Bill 2249 is withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations and referred to the Committee of Social Services Budget. Change of reference. House Bill 2250 is withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations and referred to Committee on Social Service Budget. House Bill 2248 is withdrawn from the Committee on Appropriations, referred to Committee on Social Service Budget. House Bill 2287 is withdrawn from the Committee of K-12 Education Budget and referred to the Committee of Commerce. Messages from the Senate. The clerk will read.
Announcing passage of Senate Bills 22, 32, 36, 55, 58, 64, and 70. Senate Bill Number 22 by the Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning income taxation relating to addition and subtraction modifications of the treatment of global tangible low-taxed income business interests, capital contributions, FDIC premiums, business meals, and payment protection program loans and expenses. Senate Bill Number 32 by the Committee on Education, an act concerning education relating to post-secondary education, concurrent and dual enrollment. Senate Bill Number 36 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to salvage vehicles, allowing employees of salvage vehicle pools to perform vehicle identification number inspections. Senate Bill Number 55 by the Committee on Education, an act concerning the healing arts, relating to healing arts schools. Senate Bill Number 58 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning liens or claims against real property or personal property relating to prohibitions of certain filings. Senate Bill Number 64 by the Committee on Education, an act concerning post-secondary education relating to the regulation of private and out-of-state educational institutions by the State Board of Regents. Senate Bill Number 70 by the Committee on Assessment and Taxation, an act concerning sales taxation relating to exemptions from the sales or selling price, making exemption of certain cash rebates on sales or leases or new motor vehicles permanent.
House Bill 2050 appears on the consent calendar for the second day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it remain on the consent calendar for the third day. House Bill 2072 appears on the consent calendar for the third day. Is there objection? Seeing none, it is advanced to final action. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2072 by the Committee on Insurance and Pensions, an act concerning insurance relating to risk-based capital requirements, updating the version of instructions in effect.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2072. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote.
Wolfmore votes aye. She's having some difficulty.
Representative Wolfmore votes aye.
Wolfmore. Helgerson.
Representative Helgerson votes aye. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Owens votes aye.
No. Featherston.
Representative Featherston votes aye. Representative Turner votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? The 123 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2072. The same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. The chair recognizes the majority leader for a motion to resolve into the committee of the whole.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for the purpose of considering those items under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The motion carries. The chair appoints Representative Mason, the chair of the Committee of the Whole.
Good morning, committee. We have
Turn your mic on.
good morning, committee. Anybody hear me? Can you hear me now? There we go. Good morning, committee. Have a lot of work to do today, so we might as well get started. The first item of business today is House Bill 2102, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2102, the chair recognizes Representative Eric Smith.
Committee amendments. Folks, the most exciting bill of the day, egg repackaging, HB 2102. You've seen this bill before. Last year it came before the House. We passed it out 121 to 4, I believe. Basically what it does is allows retailers to move some undamaged eggs into cartons that have had damaged eggs removed. Basically sets up definitions, technical changes to allow that. Very simple egg repackaging bill. There were only two proponents, and that was Walmart and Hy-Vee. Nobody opposed it. There is no fiscal note attached, and I'll stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are people smiling over here when I come to the microphone. We had fun with this bill in committee because I asked questions and everybody was surprised that there were questions to ask on this. But I do think it's a good bill. It's really only changing. They can now be considered grade A instead of just grade B or something like that. But it would be happening as anyway, and now we've got some regulation on it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the bill.
Is there further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Smith, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, this is chicken eggs, not ducks. And I close.
Representative, we're going to need a motion.
I move that when the committee rises and reports, it passes HB 2102 favorably. Thank you.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. It appears the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. The next item of business is House Bill 2014, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2104, the chair recognizes Representative Hoheisel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were committee amendments. I move adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Motion carries. Please proceed.
Colleagues, HB 2014 comes to us from the Committee on Transportation, and it would allow for the registration of certain military surplus vehicles and allow them to operate on Kansas roadways. The bill would define such a vehicle as one that meets the following requirements: has 3 or fewer axes, meets size and weight limits and continuing law, is less than 35 years old, and was manufactured for use in the U.S. military forces or the military force of any country that was a member of the North American Treaty Organization, or NATO for short, at the time the vehicle was manufactured, and subsequently was authorized for sale to civilians. HB 2014 was amended in committee to exclude any tracked vehicles. The original bill had fully tracked vehicles. We didn't want half-tracked tanks going down our roadways, so we changed it to any tracked vehicles were excluded from this. The reason for the 35 years or newer is because at 35 years, these vehicles are eligible for an antique military plate. So this one is allowing those 35 years and newer, authorizing their use on the roadways. And with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Does any member wish to speak on the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
There was no opposition to the bill. Everyone was in favor of it. But if there is anybody considering using your half-track and getting it licensed, keep that in mind. We will not be able to use it.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Hoheisel, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2014 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item of business is House Bill 2112. And for the purposes of carrying House Bill 2112, the chair recognizes Representative Bourgeon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments.
Please proceed.
House Bill 2112 comes to you from the Commerce Committee, and it makes changes to the Self-Service Storage Act. The purpose is to allow operators of self-storage rental units to sell property due to abandonment or non-payment of rent. The bill made 4 modifications to the act. They include limiting the operator's liability for a renter's claim of damage, allows the renter to designate an alternative contact, permits an auction to be conducted online or in person, and it modernizes the notice requirements. I would note for the body that a similar bill, House Bill 2454, passed the House in 2020 by a vote of 114 to 9, and the Senate did not work it due to the early adjournment related to COVID. So fiscal note is insignificant, and I would prepared to stand for any questions.
Is there discussion on the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Ellis.
Would you stand for questions? How you doing?
Just fine.
A little nervous?
A little bit.
Hey, forget about it. Hey, are you from Topeka, right?
I am from Topeka,
Have you
yes.
ever been to Kansas City?
I have been to Kansas City, yes.
Good. We have a common friend, don't we?
We do.
I thought we were friends. You're in home decor, right? A business?
We do have a retail home decor business, yes, sir.
Do you have storage units?
I do not.
Oh, well, there's no conflict there, no legal ramifications. Now, I know a guy, a friend of mine. Would you be able to sit down and with some of my friends in Kansas City and sort of talk about this bill? Have a sit down?
Sure.
Maybe we can work out an accommodation. I know he can give you an offer you can't refuse. He's a friend of mine, and later on, you'll be a friend of ours. Anyway, you've done a great job. I'd like to welcome you to the House of Representatives.
For further discussion on the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill passed through committee with very little controversy, and I would urge you all to continue to keep it clean to show respect to the members of the committee and the work that we did. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
The chair recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. 2 years ago, House Bill 2237 was introduced. And what House Bill 2237 would do would give cities, counties, and school districts the ability to publish their legal publications online in lieu of the newspaper. It would give them the option to do that if they thought that that best suited the members of their district. I think we can all agree that over this last year, doing things online has kind of become natural. And if you don't have an internet connection yet, you may not have one. You know, when we look at this, I have a county in my district that there is one newspaper in the entire county. When they went to publish their legal publication for delinquent property taxes, they were charged $20,000 by their newspaper because they knew they could. And I know that that's not the only example because I've had a number of others that have brought that to my attention as well. So when I look at this bill and I see that we're talking about this very topic, about instead of publishing this through the newspaper, we're doing it online, I thought it would be the great opportunity to bring an amendment forward to have this discussion. However, it was brought to my attention that House Bill 2205 has been introduced this year, which is identical to House Bill 2237, to address this exact issue. And so in lieu of offering an amendment to that effect today, I'm going to hold the amendment and hope that the discussion actually gets heard, that the bill gets heard, because I firmly believe that that is the best process for a bill to become law, is for it to go through the committee process, for it to have the appropriate hearings and to be vetted, in lieu of making a spur-of-the-moment decision here today on this. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, Representative Bourgeon, you may close.
Thank you, Representative, and I look forward to the opportunity. I appreciate that we can consider your topic in committee. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2112 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business is House Bill 2063. And for the purposes of carrying House Bill 2063, the chair recognizes Representative Dodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. You may proceed.
I rise before the body to present House Bill 2063. This act revises certain Kansas Police and Fire Tier 2 spousal and children benefits for a death resulting from a service-connected disability. The House passed HB 2452, 125 to 0 last year, and the Joint Committee recommended introduction one day prior to the end of the session. We had two amendments. One was to change a date from 1 July 2019 to 1 January 2017. This was in order to catch the last person that we knew that might be eligible for this change. The other one was to name the bill the Michael Wells Memorial Act. This was in honor of a firefighter who died of his disabilities. There were no opponents. We owe a lot to these firefighters and our law enforcement officers. Many of us probably haven't realized how much we owed to them until the pandemic hit, and we see them everywhere doing all of the things to keep us safe. Many of these professions carry a substantial risk. For example, firefighters run a risk 14% higher than the rest of us for death from cancer. This is due to the materials that are usually on site that are burning, and also some of the chemicals that are used to put out the fires. We heard some very powerful testimony from Mrs. Wells, the widow. She was forced to care for 3 children and care for her husband as he died from this disability. Under the benefit structure, which is the one we have today, when a Tier 2 KP&F member, and that applied to Michael Wells, becomes disabled and then dies due to a service-connected condition before he reaches eligibility, the benefit is less than if the member dies as a direct result in the line of duty. The new benefit would offer an option, the greater of either a monthly benefit based upon up to 50% of the member's final average salary at the time of disability, plus 10% for each dependent child. Now, the children run up to age 18, and then also cover those up to age 23 who are enrolled in college, or the retirement benefit the member would have received if the member had retired, if there are no dependent children. All of these have a maximum of 75% of the value. So again, this bill trues up the difference between someone who has a disability and then dies, and someone who is injured and dies as a result of an accident. Proponent testimony for this bill was provided by the Kansas State Council of Firefighters, the Kansas Association of Chiefs of Police, the Kansas Sheriff's Association, and the Kansas Peace Officers Association. Now, the fiscal note shows that the bill introduced would only increase employer contributions by 0.04%. And KPERS reports that the administrative costs would be negligible and they would be covered under existing resources. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be happy to stand for questions.
For discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Epley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would ask if the carrier of the bill would stand for a couple of questions. They're pretty straightforward. I'm understanding that this is your first bill, is that correct, Representative? Okay, knowing that this is your first bill, we always call into question one's background, and so I have to ask this question to the body today and to you. Am I to understand that you're retired military, is that correct? And what was your rank when you retired? Lieutenant General. So you were a Lieutenant General. So is that like a General Light? Is that a real general, or what does that mean? Is that a real deal, or?
Well, for a little bit of history on this, many of you might not know, but when they were forming, particularly for the Civil War, a brigadier general who is a one-star was called a brigade general. A two-star, which generally commanded a division, was called a sergeant major general. And then one who commanded corps was known as a lieutenant general, and then a full general commanded armies. Later on, we dropped the sergeant from the sergeant major. So I was lucky enough to make it to Corps Command.
Well, that was a lot of information, even more than I bargained for. So we really appreciate that edification, and I just want to make sure that the body understands there's a lot of rumors and the walls talk and we hear things, and I've been told on good advice that if this bill doesn't pass that you have the authority and the power to invoke martial law. Is that true?
Well, perhaps just some PT at 6 in the morning would be enough.
Thank you, Mr. Representative, and welcome to the Kansas Legislature.
For further discussion, the chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
Thank you. Two loads. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job. The representative that spoke after that, I'm not sure he knows what the bill is about, but we can discuss that, I think, later on. But it was good humor. The carrier did an excellent job of describing this bill. One of the things maybe that you don't know about this bill is that these members are very susceptible to cancer, both the fire and the police in the business that they're in, and lung and respiratory tract disease, bloodborne pathogens, hepatitis, contraction, and heart disease. So when you're looking at this, it's a pretty defined, but it's a really hard way to lose an active member of the fire department or police department. And so I encourage you to vote for this bill, and I would recommend it highly. Thank you very much.
The chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Always a pleasure to address the House when you're in the chair. Such a lovely day. The carrier of the bill did an excellent job in educating me on the difference between a brigadier general and a major general, and I have to confess to you, I've never met in person a general with more than 3 stars, so that's as high in the order as I've gone, but I appreciate you letting me know where that came from. I didn't realize any of that. Turning to the legislation in question, this is a good bill, okay? We ought to take care of people who are exposed to chemicals, diseases, etc., and we don't see the symptoms or the consequences until days, weeks, months, years later. Called a latent injury, one that you acquire on the job, but you don't necessarily suffer from it until years later. We ought to pass this bill, but we need to keep in mind that firefighters and police officers are not the only state employees, let alone public sector employees, who are subject to occupational injury on the job that is latent. They are exposed today, and we don't see the symptoms until later. For example, we have employees at KDHE who have responsibilities to deal with a whole host of toxic and bad things. We have people at KDHE down in the State Virology Laboratory, and they have good precautions, and I'm not afraid necessarily, but when someone contracts a bloodborne illness, even if they're not a firefighter or a police officer, the impact on their health and the impact on their families is the same. All lives matter. All life is important. And the problem here is that we're taking care of police officers and firefighters today, but we are leaving hundreds of state employees behind who suffer the same type of injury, but they don't ride fire trucks or drive police cars. And we are leaving thousands of Kansas workers in the private sector completely behind, because the combination of our occupational disease statute and workers' compensation and the very short time deadlines for making claims cause people in the private sector and state employees who are not police and fire to have the same types of injuries, the same types of consequences, but no compensation whatsoever to them, their families, their dependents, their widows. And so while we should vote for this, we need to think about all working Kansans who are exposed on the job to chemicals and other occupational hazards that unfortunately under our workers' compensation laws receive little, if any, compensation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Dodson, you may close.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate those comments. I move that when the body rises to report, it reports House Bill 2063 favorable for passage.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes. The next item of business is House Bill 2030, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2030, the chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, there were no committee amendments. First, I'd like to start by congratulating the Revisor's Office for a masterful drafting job on this bill. HB 2030 is identical to last year's HB 2469, which passed this body 120 to 5. Current law makes provision for the release of an inmate who has been certified by a physician to be likely to die within 30 days. The application must be made by the Department of Corrections, and notice is given to the prosecuting attorney and the judge of the court in which the person is convicted. Also, any victim of the person's crime or the victim's family, if the victim is deceased, is notified. That application is then reviewed by the chairperson of the Prisoner Review Board using the following criteria: the person's age and personal history, the person's criminal history, the person's length of sentence and time the person has served, the nature and circumstance of the current offense, the risk or threat to the community if released, whether an appropriate release plan has been established, and other factors deemed relevant by the chairperson of the board. Only one inmate was released under this law in 2020, and the last release prior to that was in 2013. The reason for that is that the application procedure generally takes more than 30 days to review. So with a 30-day window, an inmate for whom an application has been filed has often passed away before the application process is complete. Most states with a similar procedure to this allow an inmate with a terminal diagnosis of 6 months or longer to apply. And the only thing that this bill does is to change that period in Kansas law from 30 days to 120 days. It's a very simple bill. The proponents of the bill included the Kansas Sentencing Commission, the Kansas Department of Corrections, the American Civil Liberties Union, and 2 private citizens filed opposition testimony. They wanted to make sure that the bill did not apply to off-grid crimes like capital murder. The law does not apply that. Current law does not apply to off-grid crimes, and this bill does not change that. Again, I would remind the body that this bill passed last year by a vote of 120 to 5, and I would stand for any questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Jennings.
The ranking minority member of the Corrections and Juvenile Justice Committee did a rather exhaustive review and accurate review of the bill, and I ask for your support.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Heiberger, you may close.
I always try to be thorough, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2030 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. The next item of business is House Bill 2075, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2075, the chair recognizes Representative Humphreys.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Colleagues, I bring you HB 2075 from the Judiciary Committee. This bill adjusts the venue in our adoption statutes. It provides that in an agency adoption, venue may be anywhere where the department, so that would be DCF, or a subcontracting agency has an office. So the result is basically that adoptive families and attorneys have more options where to file an adoption when it is an agency or a DCF foster care adoption. Last year, we passed this exact bill 124 to 1, and I will stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Carmichael.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Always a pleasure to appear once again when you're presiding. HB 2075 is good legislation. The representative from Wichita has done an outstanding job of explaining the legislation. I urge your support for HB 2075. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Humphreys, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports HB 2075 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Our next item of business is House Bill 2062, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2062, the chair recognizes Representative Esau.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no committee amendments to this bill.
Please proceed.
In its work to review the causes of child deaths in Kansas, the State Child Death Review Board utilizes a legacy database that's been maintained by a private vendor at a cost of about $10,000 per fiscal year. But the vendor is no longer providing that service, saving the state money in the short term, but leaving the board dependent on an aging system without maintenance. I'll let you think on that for 10 seconds. In 2019, this board recommended we make statutory changes that would allow them to use a national database, which would both eliminate the need to maintain this aging system and would provide the board access to information across state lines, which may allow for more thorough investigations. Participating in the national database is free for participating states. Confidentiality of records would still be maintained with exceptions and protections clearly defined by statute. In addition to making changes to allow the use of the national database, this bill also permits the board to share information with law enforcement and county or district attorneys for investigation and prosecution purposes. Currently, information and records obtained by the State Child Death Review Board are confidential and may not be disclosed. And this bill would expand the language that gives exceptions to the general rule, but it's in very narrowly defined circumstances, which I'm happy to answer any questions regarding that if you have them. There could be additional referrals for investigation. There could be more requests for records, but all of those things are things that agencies either felt could be within their budget or they couldn't estimate how much it might have a fiscal impact. And I would draw your attention to the fact that this bill is identical to HB 2438 last year, and that passed this body 125-0, so I'll save you looking it up. If you were here, you must have voted for it. And then it died in the Senate committee due to the early shutdown of the 2020 session. There were a number of supporters, Attorney General, district attorneys, chief of police, et cetera, and no one opposed this bill, and I would be happy to stand for questions.
To speak to the bill, the chair recognizes Representative Owsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the carrier of the bill. Caucus members, I apologize. I left out the information this morning on the database, and that is a critical part of this bill. Other than that, I think she did a thorough job explaining it, and I urge your support for House Bill 2062. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Esau, you may close.
The safeguards in statute for providing confidentiality in child death cases that are reviewed remain strong, and the additional exceptions to sharing information could lead to justice for children that might not otherwise be possible. And in addition, we all know the danger of relying on aging computer systems, plus it's possible to have access to nationwide data that could lead to the prevention of some child deaths and justice for others. For these reasons, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it report House Bill 2062 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item of business has House Bill 2081, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2081, the chair recognizes Representative Wheeler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2081 comes through the Correction and Juvenile Justice Committee from the Kansas Sentencing Commission.
We're going to need a committee report. There were amendments.
Forgive me, Mr. Chair. There was one committee amendment. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Please proceed.
This bill would amend a special sentencing rule governing persons who are convicted and sentenced for a crime while on release for a felony to allow a court to direct whether the sentence should be served either concurrently or consecutively. Current law directs that such sentences shall be served consecutively. For those who may be unfamiliar with these terms and sentencing terms, concurrently obviously means serving at the same time. Consecutively means serving one after the other. The Sentencing Commission did some research on this and found that district court judges were varying from the Kansas law by giving concurrent sentences 40% of the time. This bill would also amend a special sentencing rule governing unlawful manufacture of controlled substance to specify that when a person has one or more prior felony convictions of a manufacturing offense or a substantially similar offense from another jurisdiction, and any of the prior offenses were for manufacture of methamphetamine, upon conviction, the person shall be given a presumptive imprisonment of 2 times the maximum length of sentence imposed under the guidelines. This bill would further amend a special sentencing rule governing unlawful possession of a controlled substance to specify that when a person has 2 or more prior felony convictions for the offense, a subsequent conviction would result in the sentence being presumption of imprisonment. Current law requires a 3rd conviction before such a sentence is imposed. There is no substantial fiscal impact from this bill. Sentencing Commission could not estimate the number of effect on beds in prisons. There was no opposition to this bill. There was no neutral to this bill. And with that, Mr. Chair, I stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? Chair recognizes Representative Heiberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the carrier did a fine job of explaining the bill. With regard to the first part, I think the circumstances under which these sentences are imposed they're very enough that I think the judicial discretion is warranted in these cases. And the second part is just a technical cleanup, so I would encourage your support for the bill.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Wheeler, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2081 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. Next item on business is House Bill 2064, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2064, the chair recognizes Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were committee amendments. I move the adoption of the committee report.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The committee report is adopted, and you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2064, as amended, would adjust provisions of the Deferred Retirement Option Program, also known as DROP. This program currently serves retirement-eligible staff members of the Kansas Highway Patrol and the Kansas Bureau of Investigation. This bill would allow an enrolled member who previously elected a drop period of less than 5 years to revoke such election with the employer's authorization and extend their drop period to an aggregate maximum of 5 years. The Committee on Insurance and Pensions held a hearing on this bill in which there were no proponents or opponents. Capers provided neutral testimony, which included a suggested technical amendment. The technical amendment was later adopted by the committee, which would provide the aggregate total drop period must be consecutive. For the fiscal note, Capers indicated the potential cost associated with the enactment of this bill would be negligible. Mr. Speaker, I'll stand for questions.
Does anyone wish to speak to the bill? Surely someone wants to speak to the bill. The chair recognizes Representative Neighbor.
The carrier of the bill did an excellent job. I have just a few questions for him, I believe. Would you mind answering? Okay. Does this have an effect on people staying in the business longer? Does it have an effect on employment and keeping those people that are trained in that group longer?
As you may be aware, this DROP program was created as a pilot program back in the legislature back in 2015. And so the goal of DROP is to incent these staff to defer retirement for 3, 4, or 5 years. The agencies believe DROP would help them keep experienced retirement-eligible employees longer. It also gives these agencies more time to recruit and train new staff to replace them.
Mr. Howe, is this your first bill? Well, as a member of the opposite party, of the Democrat Party, this side over here, I know you don't see us very much, but I'd like to congratulate you today on your first bill. You did an excellent job of describing it, and I'd like for everybody to stand up and give him a little acknowledgement. Mr. Howe did a great job of defining the bill as it stands. This is really a good way to keep experienced workers in the job, and it gives them a little bit more leeway which way they want to go in the DROP program. So I would recommend support of this bill. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Howe, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the ranking member of the Insurance and Pensions Committee for the gracious remarks. Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2064 favorably for passage.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Next item of business is House Bill 2167, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2167, the chair recognizes Representative Neely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There were no committee amendments.
You may proceed.
I rise before the body to present House Bill 2167. The bill was introduced by the House Transportation Committee. This bill is concerning allowing concrete mixers and requiring dump trucks with a gross weight of over 26,000 pounds to display license plates on the front of the vehicle, and would authorize law enforcement officers to issue a warning citation to anyone in violation of displaying a license plate on the front of the dump truck. The Kansas Motor Carriers Association was in favor of this bill, and there was no fiscal effect. I will stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Helgerson.
There were no questions. You did an admirable job of explaining the bill. I urge you to support the bill. Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Neely, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the body rises to report, they report House Bill 2167, favorable for passage.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And the motion passes. The next and final item on our agenda today is House Bill 2005, and for the purpose of carrying House Bill 2005, the chair recognizes Representative Mennix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were no amendments in committee on this bill.
You may proceed.
House Bill 2005 passed out of the Water Committee as presented by Representative Highland. It would exclude hot water supply boilers that have a water capacity of 120 gallons or less from the provisions of the Boiler Safety Act. The language being removed was added in 1998. With the removal of this language, it takes it back to the 1977 Act definitions. At the hearing for House Bill 2005, there were 2 proponents, no opponents, and the State Fire Marshal's office was neutral. House Bill 2005 would become effective upon publication in the Kansas Register. The fiscal note appears to be a savings of $1,070 if the Fire Marshal's office reduces employment by 1 full-time equivalency to compensate for the loss in revenue from boiler inspections. I will stand for questions.
Does any member wish to speak to the bill? The chair recognizes Representative Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to defer my comments until after the next speaker speaks to the bill. I believe that Representative Owens would like to speak.
The chair recognizes Representative Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would the maker of the bill stand for a question? Can you tell me the difference between a boiler and a water heater?
Yes, sir. According to the Boiler Act of 1977, the difference between a boiler and a hot water heater are just a couple of items. A boiler is physically stronger. It has temperatures above 212 degrees or above 210. It has to be able to withstand pressures because you're producing steam at that point. The bill 2005 addresses hot water heaters. They're 210 degrees and below at a nominal water capacity of 120 gallons. Many of us have water heaters in our homes of that size. There's no need for annual inspection. Many of the insurance companies have agreed that that's not necessary.
Wow, thank you, Representative. Well, hold on. Rumor has it you're also a cattleman. Is that farmer cattleman?
Yes.
Can you also tell me the difference between a whole cow and a 2% cow?
No, sir.
All right. This is your first bill, correct? Yes. Excellent. Welcome to the legislature.
The chair would like to recognize Representative Bishop again and thank her for her courtesy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a very good bill. I want to commend my colleague for doing an excellent job of presenting it. I know what it's like to be up here as a freshman introducing your first bill. There was testimony by the Office of the State Fire Marshal, and I would just note that he had no heartburn with it. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Minix, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports House Bill 2005 favorably for passage.
You've all heard the motion. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion passes. This concludes our general orders, and the chair would recognize the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move we rise and report.
You've all heard the motion to rise and report. All in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The motion passes.
The clerk will read the committee report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole recommends House Bills 2102, 2112, 2030, 2075, 2062, 2167, and 2005 be passed. House Bills 2014, 2063, 2081, and 2064 be passed as amended.
Speaker recognizes Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The committee report is adopted. The chair recognizes the majority leader for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 2311, I move that an emergency be declared and that House Bill 2102, 2014, 2112, 2063, 2030, 2075, 2062, 2081, 2064, 2167, and House Bill 2005 be advanced to that order of business final action on bills and concurrent resolutions.
For the motion, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Final action, the clerk will read.
Read slow. House Bill number 2102 by the Committee on Agriculture, an act concerning agriculture relating to eggs, repackaging requirements for retailers.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2102. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Hubert votes aye. Representative Wheeler votes aye. Clarification, Representative Wheeler, how do you vote? You're aye. Representative Sutton votes aye.
Ballard, aye.
Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Mason votes aye. Representative Finch votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 123 voted in favor, 2 against the passage of House Bill 2102, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2014 by Representative Williams, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to the registration and regulation of military surplus vehicles.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2014. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Sawyer votes aye. Has every member had their opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 124 voted in favor and 1 against the passage of House Bill 2014, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action. Clerk will read.
House Bill number 2112 by the Committee on Commerce, Labor, and Economic Development, an act concerning self-storage rental units relating to sales by operators of property due to abandonment or non-payment of rent, occupants' designation of alternate contract, contractual value of property.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2112. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 120 voted in favor and 5 against, the passage of House Bill 2112, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2063 by the Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits, an act concerning retirement and pensions relating to the Kansas Police and Firemen's Retirement System, providing certain spousal and children's benefits for death resulting from a service-connected disability, enacting the Michael Wells Memorial Act.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2063. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Corbett votes aye. Representative Victors votes aye. Representative Alcala votes aye. Representative Miller votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 125 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2063, the same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2030 by the Joint Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice Oversight, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to terminal medical release, criteria for release, permitting release earlier in terminal diagnosis.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2030. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Sutton votes no. Representative Hubert votes no. Representative Ballard votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? Representative Delperding votes aye. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Corbett votes aye. No. Representative Corbett votes no. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? 96 voted in favor, 29 against. The passage of House Bill 2030. The same have received a constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2075 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the probate code relating to adoption, venue, agency adoptions.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2075. The clerk will open the roll and you may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Hubert votes aye. Representative Delperding votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 125 voted in favor, 0 against, the passage of House Bill 2075, the same have received the constitutional majority. The bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2062 by the Committee on Children and Seniors, an act concerning the State Child Death Review Board relating to confidentiality of records, exceptions thereto.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2062. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Hubert votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Wolfmore votes aye. Representative Bishop votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 125 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2062, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record a vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2081 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to sentencing, multiple sentences for people convicted of a new crime, modifying how certain prior convictions are counted for the special sentencing rule related to possession of a controlled substance.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2081. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes no. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Corbett votes no. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Wolfmore votes aye. Representative Alcala votes aye. Representative Patton votes no. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Representative Finch.
Mr. Speaker, I would support the second portion of this bill to clarify legislative intent regarding the use of special sentencing rules. However, I cannot support the first part. People who are on release from custody for committing a felony and who then commit another felony while on release should receive the maximum possible sentence, and those sentences should run back to back, not at the same time. This bill would allow for some of those sentences to run at the same time, and therefore I must vote no on this bill. Representatives Finch and Barker.
Further explanation? Representative Landwehr votes no. Representative Berquist votes no. Who's up there? Somebody upstairs. Representative Penn votes no. Representative Ellis votes no. Representative Clark votes no. Representative Howard votes no. Representative Lynn votes no. Representative Tim Johnson votes no. Representative Prahl votes no. Representative Francis votes no. Any further changes? Representative Miller votes no. Representative Esau votes no. Representative Kessler votes no. Further changes? 69 voted in favor and 59 against. 56 against, 69 in favor, 59 against. The passage, with 69 voted in favor and 56 against the passage of House Bill 2081, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2064 by the Joint Committee on Pensions, Investments, and Benefits, an act concerning retirement and pensions relating to the Kansas Deferred Retirement Option Program Act, election, extension of initial drop period.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2064. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Baker votes aye. Representative Epley votes aye. Representative Williams votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Owsley votes aye. Has every member an opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? With 125 voted in favor, 0 against the passage of House Bill 2064, the same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2167 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles relating to license plates, permitting concrete mixer trucks and requiring dump trucks to display license plates on the front of vehicles.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2167. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Baker votes aye. Representative Bishop votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote? 125 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2167. The same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will record the vote. Final action, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2005 by Representative Highland, an act concerning the Boiler Safety Act relating to exceptions to the applicability of the act, specific specifications for certain hot water supply boilers.
This constitutes final action on House Bill 2005. The clerk will open the roll. You may record your vote. Representative Sutton votes aye. Representative Heiberger votes aye. Representative Ballard votes aye. Representative Baker votes aye. Representative Patton votes aye. Has every member had the opportunity to record their vote? The clerk will close the roll. Does any member desire to explain his or her vote? Does any member desire to change his or her vote. 125 voted in favor and 0 against the passage of House Bill 2005. The same having received a constitutional majority, the bill is hereby declared passed. The clerk will close the roll. Reports of standing committees, the clerk will read.
Committee on Water recommends House Bill 2172 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development recommends Senate Bill 15 be passed. Committee on Financial Institutions and Rural Development recommends House Bill 2158 be passed. Committee on Local Government recommends House Bill 2178 be passed. Committee on Elections recommends House Bill 2052 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2058 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Appropriations recommends House Bill 2021 be passed. Committee on Children and Seniors recommends House Bill 2151 be passed. Committee on Children and Seniors recommends House Bill 2116 be passed. Committee on Children and Seniors recommends House Bill 2150 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Telecommunications recommends House Bill 2145 be passed. Committee on Federal and State Affairs recommends House Bill 2087 be amended. The bill be passed as amended. Yeah.
I'd like to return to introduction of bills. Is there objection? Seeing none, the clerk will read.
House Bill number 2333 by Representative Topliker, an act concerning elections relating to advanced voting ballots, prohibiting acceptance of incomplete applications for such ballots. House Bill number 2334 by Representative Topliker, an act concerning elections relating to electronic voting machines, prohibiting network connections to such machines. House Bill number 2335 by the Committee on Agriculture, an act concerning agriculture, creating the Kansas Cotton Commission, and relating to the powers and duties thereof. House Bill number 2336 by the Committee on Agriculture, an act concerning wildlife, relating to wildlife violations, creating a violation and imposing penalties for taking wildlife simulated devices. House Bill number 2337 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning traffic regulations relating to vulnerable road users. House Bill number 2338 by the Committee on Children and Seniors, an act concerning the Department for Children and Families relating to children and minors, establishing a pilot program for obtaining driver's licenses. House Bill number 2339 by Representative Topliker, an act concerning elections, expanding the crime of election tampering. House Bill number 2340 by the Committee on Federal State Affairs, an act concerning cigarettes and tobacco products, increasing the minimum age to purchase or possess such products. House Bill number 2341 by the Committee on Transportation, an act concerning motor vehicles, relating the Vehicle Dealers Manufacturing Act, permitting first and second stage vehicle manufacturers to be vehicle dealers. House Bill number 2342 by Representative Vaughn, an act concerning health and health care relating to the practice pharmacy. House Bill number 2343 by Representative Vaughn, an act concerning insurance, health insurance coverage, providing coverage for prescription contraceptives dispensed for 3 months or 12 months period. House Bill number 2344 by the Committee on Elections, an act concerning Riley County requiring the election of a sheriff and the abolishment of the Riley County Law Enforcement Agency. House Bill number 2345 by Representative Sousley Baker and others, an act concerning children and minors relating to the legislature, establishing the Office of the Child Advocate for Children's Protection and Services. House Bill number 2346 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to pretrial release of defendants. House Bill number 2347 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, or criminal procedure relating to sex offenses, creating rape during a treatment session, reducing criminal penalties for attempt, conspiracy, and solicitation of certain sex offenses. House Bill number 2348 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning insurance related to automobile liability insurance, modifying uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage liability limitations for bodily injury or death. House Bill number 2349 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning the Kansas Offender Registration Act relating to relief from registration violation of Act. House Bill number 2350 by the Committee on Corrections and Juvenile Justice, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure relating to sentencing. House Bill number 2351 by the Committee on K-12 Education Budget, an act concerning high school work-based learning programs, liability for students in business, municipal and post-secondary educational institution program providers. House Bill number 2352 by Representative Vaughn, an act concerning sales taxation relating to exemptions, providing for an exemption for farm products sold at farmers markets. House Bill number 2353 by the Committee on Appropriations, an act establishing the Kansas Commission for the United States Semiquincentennial in the Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, prescribing commission membership responsibilities, meetings, and expiration. House Bill number 2354 by the Committee on K-12 Education Budget, an act concerning public employee, professional employees organizations relating to dues. House Concurrent Resolution number 5011 by Representative Woodard, Byers, and others of it, a proposition to repeal Section 16 of Article 15 of the Constitution of the State of Kansas relating to marriage being only between individuals of the opposite sex. House Concurrent Resolution number 5012 by Representative Parker, proposition to amend the Constitution of the State of Kansas by revising Article 10 relating to reapportionment of congressional districts, legislative districts, and State Board of Education member districts.
Are there announcements? Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Democrats, we will have agenda tomorrow morning at 8:30 a.m. Check your email for your Zoom link. Thank you.
Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Johnson County delegation members, there's still time to go down to room 281 North. We will be hearing about 69 Highway. There's also a WebEx link sent at about 8:04 a.m. from Robin Crumpton, if you want to hop onto that. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In room 121 East, we're having prayer. Everybody's invited. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any further announcements? Seeing none, Majority Leader Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have one announcement for Representative Riley. There will be a prayer breakfast tomorrow morning, Thursday, February 11th, 7 a.m. in room 142. Guest speaker will be Kevin Christensen. Republicans, we will have calendar tomorrow morning at 8:30 on WebEx. Mr. Speaker, I move the House adjourn until Thursday, February 11th at 11 a.m.
You've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. We are adjourned.